Wealthy CEO abandoned his pregnant maid. Years later, she was a billionaire, and he begged for her mercy. The accusation hit her like a slap. She'd been a virgin before him, 23 years old and waiting for someone special. He'd been her first, her only, and now he was calling her a whore. Have you ever seen someone from your past who hurt you deeply? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She held the pregnancy test with trembling fingers while Manhattan's golden boy sat behind his mahogany desk, cold as winter stone, about to destroy her life with 4 brutal words. Have you ever trusted someone who saw you as disposable? Have you ever believed someone's whispered promises in the dark, only to watch them turn into your worst nightmare in the light? Drop a heart if you've ever been dismissed by someone who once claimed to want you. This story is for everyone who's been underestimated. The penthouse office gleamed with success. Awards lining walls of imported marble, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Manhattan like a conquered kingdom. But the woman standing before his desk saw none of the luxury, only the man whose touch had once made her forget her place in his world. "I'm pregnant," Kiana Brooks whispered, her Georgia accent barely audible in the vast space. The words hung between them like smoke from a gun that had already fired. Richard Langston didn't even look up from his computer screen. Wall Street's youngest tech CEO, worth $3 billion at 32, couldn't be bothered to acknowledge the maid who cleaned his offices after hours. "Congratulations," he said, fingers still typing. "I'm sure whoever knocked you up will be thrilled." The cruelty hit her like a physical blow. Just 3 weeks ago, during that Hamptons party, rain had pelted the mansion windows as his hands tangled in her hair. The storm outside had nothing on the tempest between them. Forbidden desire mixing with genuine connection as he whispered her name like a prayer. "You made me laugh that night," she said quietly, placing the pregnancy test on his pristine desk. "You said I was beautiful. You said I was drunk." His eyes finally met hers, ice blue and merciless. "You were convenient." The words shattered something inside her chest. She remembered how gentle his touch had been, how he'd asked if she was okay, how he'd held her afterward like she mattered. The soft-spoken girl from Savannah had believed, for one perfect night, that she could be more than just the help. "This is yours," she said, voice stronger now despite the tears threatening to fall. Richard's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Nice try, sweetheart. How many other men were you servicing that weekend?" The accusation hit her like a slap. She'd been a virgin before him, 23 years old and waiting for someone special. He'd been her first, her only, and now he was calling her a whore. "You're fired," he continued, pulling out his checkbook. "Sign this non-disclosure agreement, take the money, and disappear. Try to pin this on me again, and my lawyers will destroy what's left of your pathetic little life." As she signed the silence agreement with shaking hands, her heart breaking with each letter, Kiana whispered words he'd never forget. "You'll regret this." Richard laughed thin, already turning back to his computer. He had no idea those 3 words were a promise, not a threat. The golden boy had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd underestimated the quiet strength of a Southern woman with nothing left to lose. 3 months pregnant and jobless, she boarded a Greyhound bus back to Georgia with nothing but hurt pride and a plan that would take 15 years to execute. Have you ever had to start over from rock bottom? What kept you going when everyone counted you out? Share your comeback story below, because this woman was about to prove that sometimes the best revenge is success. The Greyhound station in Savannah smelled of diesel fuel and broken dreams. But as she stepped off the bus with her small suitcase and growing belly, something fierce burned in her chest. Not shame, but purpose. Her mama's house sat on the outskirts of town, paint peeling from the porch rails like old scabs. The screen door slammed behind her as she walked into the familiar smell of cornbread and disappointment. "Kiana? Baby, what you doing here?" Her mother's face shifted from joy to concern as she noticed the suitcase, the exhaustion, the slight curve of her daughter's stomach. "I messed up, Mama." The words came out broken, 15 years of dreams crushed into 2 syllables. But as her mother held her that night, rocking her like a child while she cried out the pain of Richard's betrayal. Kiana felt something crystallize inside her. The business degree she'd earned working nights at the diner. The intelligence that had gotten her a scholarship to Emory before her daddy's hospital bills ate up her college fund. The strength that had carried her family through poverty. None of that had disappeared. It had just been sleeping. "That man don't deserve you," her mama whispered, hands stroking her hair. "But this baby deserves everything." Kiana placed her hands on her stomach, feeling the flutter of new life. Her daughter, somehow she knew it would be a girl, would never know what it felt like to be powerless, would never clean another person's mess for scraps, would never trust a man who saw her as temporary entertainment. The local newspaper lay folded on the kitchen table, business section facing up. Richard's company had just gone public, making him worth billions overnight. His photograph smiled back at her, confident, untouchable, already forgetting she'd ever existed. She cut out the article, finger steady now, not as a reminder of what he'd taken from her, but as a promise of what she'd take from him. That night, she enrolled in online business courses. While her daughter grew inside her, she grew too, learning corporate law, financial planning, strategic acquisition. Every late-night study session was a brick in the foundation of something bigger. When Maya was born 6 months later, Kiana looked into eyes that were Richard's exact shade of blue and made a vow. Her daughter would never know what it felt like to be invisible. And someday, neither would the man who tried to erase them both. The war had begun. He just didn't know it yet. While Richard celebrated another billion-dollar deal in Manhattan penthouses, Kiana was learning the art of war through night classes and 18-hour workdays in small-town Georgia. What's the longest you've worked toward a goal that seemed impossible? Tell me about a time patience paid off for you. Because this woman was about to teach the world that slow burns create the hottest fires. The community college classroom buzzed with artificial light as she balanced accounting textbooks with a sleeping toddler on her lap. Every page turned a step closer to the revenge she'd never name out loud. Maya's small hand curled around her finger as Kiana absorbed lessons on corporate takeovers and hostile acquisitions. By day, she worked 3 jobs: cleaning houses for the wealthy families in Savannah's historic district, catering weekend events at the country club, bookkeeping for small businesses that couldn't afford real accountants. Every dollar earned went toward 2 things: Maya's future and her education. The other women in her night classes whispered about her dedication. Single mother, they said. Poor thing, working herself to death. They didn't understand that she wasn't working toward survival. She was building an empire. Mama, why you always studying? 4-year-old Maya asked one evening, climbing on her lap as Kiana reviewed financial statements. Because knowledge is power, baby girl, Kiana murmured, kissing her daughter's forehead. And someday we're going to have all the power we need. Maya's eyes, Richard's eyes, sparkled with intelligence that reminded Kiana daily of what she was fighting for. Her daughter was brilliant, curious, destined for greatness. But greatness required opportunity, and opportunity required resources. Resources that could be taken from those who'd stolen them in the first place. Brooke's catering started in her mama's kitchen. Small events at first. Church functions, birthday parties, anniversary celebrations. But Kiana studied her clients, learned their connections, built relationships that stretched far beyond food service. The wealthy families whose houses she cleaned never noticed how carefully she observed their business conversations. Stock tips shared over breakfast. Corporate mergers discussed during dinner parties. Insider information served alongside their morning coffee. She invested wisely, slowly. Every extra dollar went into carefully chosen stocks, real estate investments, small business acquisitions. Her portfolio grew like a secret garden, cultivated in darkness, but reaching toward the light. That Brooks girl's got something special. The bank president's wife mentioned to her friends, not knowing Kiana was refilling their wine glasses. Smartest woman I've met in years. Shame she's stuck in service work. Stuck. The word followed Kiana home that night, but instead of stinging, it made her smile. They thought she was trapped in their world of small thinking and smaller dreams. They had no idea she was building a ladder to climb right over their heads. The letter from Richard's company arrived on Maya's 5th birthday, a routine business inquiry about catering services for their Atlanta branch opening. Brooks and Associates, they'd addressed it to, the name she'd chosen carefully, knowing he'd never connect it to the maid he'd discarded. Kiana smiled as she crafted her response, professional and polite. The hunt had officially begun, and the prey had just invited the predator to dinner. Maya blew out her birthday candles that night, wishing for something her mother couldn't hear. But Kiana made her own silent wish, that justice would taste sweeter than any cake she'd ever served. She walked into his world wearing a server's uniform and a smile that hid 15 years of calculated preparation. He looked right through her, just like before. Have you ever seen someone from your past who hurt you deeply? How did your body react before your mind caught up? Share that moment below, because some wounds never fully heal, they just learn to hide. The ballroom glittered with Manhattan's elite, crystal chandeliers casting rainbow prisms across designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. But from behind the catering station, she only watched one man, older now, graying at the temples, but still carrying himself like he owned the world. Richard Langston stood near the bar, commanding attention without trying. 15 years had been kind to him. Success looked good on his shoulders, wealth smoothed the lines around his eyes. He'd grown into the power he'd wielded so carelessly as a young CO. Kiana's hands trembled as she arranged appetizers on silver platters. Her body betrayed her with its instant response. Heart racing, skin flushing, every nerve remembering his touch despite her mind's fury. Some attractions survive even the deepest betrayals. "Excuse me," his voice cut through the crowd's murmur as he approached her station. Still smooth as aged whiskey, still capable of making her forget to breathe. She looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time in 15 years. "Yes, sir." He studied her face for a moment, confusion flickering across his features. Something familiar teased at the edges of his memory, but wealth had taught him to look through the help, not at them. "Could I get another scotch?" he asked, dismissing whatever recognition might have surfaced. "Of course." She poured his drink with steady hands, watching him scan the room for more important conversations. Just like before, she was invisible, a warm body to serve his needs and disappear. But this time, invisibility was her weapon. She moved through the party like a ghost collecting secrets. Corporate mergers discussed over cocktails. Stock tips shared between old friends. Weaknesses revealed through too much champagne and too little caution. The Atlanta expansion is bleeding money, she heard his CFO admit to another executive. 3 more months like this, and we'll have to consider selling. Kiana filed the information away with the dozens of other details she'd gathered. Every overheard conversation was another nail in his coffin, another thread to pull until his empire unraveled. Near midnight, as she cleared tables and loaded equipment, Richard passed her again. This time he paused, studying her face with alcohol-blurred focus. "Do I know you?" he asked, voice uncertain. She smiled, polite, professional, forgettable. "I don't think so, sir. I would remember meeting you." The irony tasted bitter on her tongue. She'd given him her virginity, carried his child, signed his silence agreement. But powerful men remember what they choose to remember, and he'd chosen to forget her completely. "Have a good evening, Mr. Langston," she said, turning back to her work. As his car pulled away from a venue, Kiana allowed herself one moment of pure satisfaction. He'd looked right through her, just like she planned. The invisible woman was the most dangerous kind, the one nobody saw coming until it was too late. Maya waited at home with her grandmother, homework spread across the kitchen table, brilliant mind preparing for the legacy her mother was building. Soon, very soon, she'd meet her father, but not as his daughter, as his future boss. Maya found a newspaper clipping hidden in her mother's jewelry box, a photo of Manhattan's youngest CEO with eyes exactly like her own. When do you tell a child the truth about someone who hurt you? How do you balance protection with honesty? Parents, drop your thoughts below, because some conversations change everything. The jewelry box sat open on the bed between them, its contents scattered like broken promises. But the newspaper clipping dominated everything else. Richard's confident smile, staring up at them both. "Is this my daddy?" Maya's voice carried the weight of 15 years of questions, soft but demanding truth. Kiana's carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. At 15, Maya had grown into a stunning young woman. Richard's blue eyes and her grandmother's gentle face, intelligence that outshone kids twice her age, questions that cut straight to the heart of secrets. "Where did you find that?" Kiana asked, sinking onto the bed beside her daughter. "I was looking for earrings for the school dance." Maya held up the clipping, studying the man whose DNA had shaped half her existence. "He looks like me, or I look like him." The resemblance was undeniable. Same eyes, same stubborn chin, same way of tilting her head when thinking deeply. Genetics didn't lie, even when parents did. "His name is Richard Langston," Kiana said carefully, choosing her words like stepping stones across dangerous water. "He's a businessman in New York. Does he know about me?" The question hung between them like a blade waiting to fall. How do you tell your daughter that her father not only knew about her, but actively chose to pretend she didn't exist? "It's complicated, baby. I'm not a baby anymore, Mama." Maya's voice carried new authority, the kind that comes from growing up too fast in a house full of secrets. "I deserve to know why I don't have a father." Kiana looked at her daughter. Brilliant, beautiful, deserving of every truth and every protection. Maya had her father's intelligence and her grandmother's heart. She'd survived 15 years of questions with grace, but she wouldn't survive 15 more without answers. "He hurt me," Kiana said finally, "before you were born. He chose his career over his family." It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Some truths were too sharp for young hearts, even strong ones. But people can change, right? Maya's optimism broke something inside Kiana's chest. Maybe he's different now. Maybe he'd want to know me. The hope in her daughter's voice was both beautiful and terrifying. Maya dreamed of father-daughter dances, college graduations with two proud parents, walking down an aisle with someone to give her away. Normal dreams for a girl who'd grown up with a gaping hole where half her heritage should be. "I want to meet him," Maya said quietly, her young voice carrying a determination that reminded Kiana painfully of herself. "Someday, baby," Kiana whispered, knowing that day was coming sooner than her daughter could imagine. But when they met, it would be on Kiana's terms, in her boardroom, with her holding all the power. Maya deserved better than a father who'd thrown them away. She deserved to see him humbled first. The FBI agents walked into Langston Tech at exactly 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning that would destroy everything Richard thought he owned. Have you ever watched someone's entire world collapse in real time? That's exactly what happened when federal investigators seized every computer, every file, every secret Richard had buried for 15 years. "Mr. Langston, you're under investigation for securities fraud, tax evasion, and insider trading," Agent Martinez announced while Richard's coffee grew cold in his hands. The irony? The anonymous tip that started this investigation came from someone who knew exactly where to look. Someone who had studied every weakness in his empire for over a decade. While Richard scrambled to call his lawyers, Kiana sat in her Atlanta office watching the news coverage with a glass of wine. Maya burst through the door, excitement dancing in her eyes. "Mom, did you see? That man from the party. His company is all over the news." Kiana's smile was ice-cold satisfaction. "Yes, baby, I saw." But Maya wasn't finished. The reporter said he might go to prison. "Do you think he deserves it?" The question hung heavy between them. Kiana set down her wine, remembering nights when she cried herself to sleep, pregnant and alone, while Richard probably celebrated another business deal. "Some people think they can hurt others without consequences," Kiana said carefully. "But life has a way of balancing scales." Maya studied her mother's face. At 15, she was sharper than most adults. "You know him, don't you? Really know him?" Kiana's heart stopped. Her daughter was too smart for her own good. "Why would you think that? Because you get this look?" like you're remembering something painful. And you only get that look when you're thinking about my father. The truth sat between them like a loaded gun. Kiana had spent years protecting Maya from this moment, but her daughter was growing up. Soon, she'd demand answers that Kiana wasn't ready to give. Maya, there are things about my past that I haven't shared with you yet. Things that might be hard to understand. Like what? Before Kiana could answer, her phone buzzed. A text from her business partner. Langston's board called an emergency meeting. They want to discuss the buyout offer we sent last month. Perfect timing. Kiana's pulse quickened. Phase 2 was beginning. She looked at Maya, who was still waiting for an answer about her father. About Richard. About the man whose world was crumbling on every news channel in America. Baby, how would you feel about taking a trip to New York? Maya's eyes lit up. When? Next week. There's a business meeting I need to attend. And I think it's time you learn what your mother has been building all these years. What Maya didn't know was that this trip would change both their lives forever. She didn't know that in 5 days, she'd be sitting in a boardroom staring into the eyes of the man who abandoned her before she was born. She didn't know that her mother was about to offer Richard Langston a deal that would either save him or destroy him completely. And she definitely didn't know that watching her father's company burn was just the beginning of Kiana's master plan. Have you ever planned revenge so perfectly that even you were impressed by how beautifully it came together? Drop your thoughts below, because what happens next will shock you. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're loving this story, and make sure you're subscribed because Maya's about to meet her father for the first time. Trust me, you don't want to miss that conversation. Richard's hands shook as he stared at the buyout proposal that could save his dying company. Have you ever been so desperate that you'd make a deal with the devil? That's exactly where Richard found himself when Brooks Enterprises offered to purchase Langston Tech for enough money to pay off his debts and avoid prison time. The boardroom was packed with his former allies, now vultures circling his corpse. His CFO, his best friend since college, wouldn't even make eye contact. The SEC investigation had turned everyone against him. The offer is generous, his lawyer whispered. Whoever Brooks Enterprises is, they're throwing you a lifeline. Richard studied the contract. Everything about it seemed too perfect, too convenient. Who had that kind of money? And why would they want to save him? There's one condition, board member Harrison announced. You have to meet with their CEO personally. Tomorrow. Atlanta? Richard's stomach dropped. Something about that city made his skin crawl, but he couldn't remember why. Meanwhile, Kiana was choosing her outfit for tomorrow's meeting like a general preparing for war. Black power suit, red lipstick, the same shade she'd worn the night Maya was conceived. Maya watched her mother transform from loving parent to corporate predator. Mom, you're scaring me a little. What's this meeting really about? Kiana's reflection smiled back from the mirror. Justice, baby. Pure, beautiful justice. Are you going to hurt someone? The question stopped Kiana cold. She turned to face her daughter, this brilliant young woman who had Richard's eyes and her own stubborn chin. Maya, what if I told you that someone hurt me very badly 15 years ago? Someone who had all the power while I had none. Someone who threw me away like garbage when I needed help the most. Maya's face hardened. I'd say they deserved whatever was coming to them. Even if that someone was what, Mom? Kiana almost said it. Almost told her that the man she was about to destroy was Maya's father. But something held her back. Maybe it was maternal instinct. Maybe it was fear that Maya would choose him over her. Nothing, baby. Just business. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Atlanta, about something just out of reach in his memory. A face, a voice, soft hands and desperate eyes. He'd been with so many women over the years. Models, actresses, socialites who wanted his money and status. But lately, in quiet moments, he kept remembering someone different. Someone who looked at him like he was worth saving. Someone he'd hurt badly enough that the guilt occasionally surfaced through his carefully constructed defenses. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. See you tomorrow, Richard. We have so much to discuss. Who had his personal number? His publicist had been screening all his calls since the investigation started. He tried calling back, but the number was disconnected. Richard stared at his ceiling until dawn, anxiety eating at his stomach. In 12 hours, he'd walk into that Atlanta office desperate and broken, ready to accept any deal that kept him out of prison. He had no idea he was walking into the arms of the woman whose life he'd destroyed and the daughter he'd never met. Are you Team Kiana or Team Richard? Let us know in the comments below, because tomorrow's meeting is going to change everything for both of them. Richard walked into the Brooks Enterprises building expecting to meet another corporate shark in an expensive suit. Instead, he found himself staring into the eyes of the woman who had haunted his guilty dreams for 15 years. Hello, Richard. Have you ever seen someone's entire world shift in a single moment? Richard's face went white as recognition hit him like a freight train. The scared girl who used to clean his office had transformed into the most powerful woman he'd ever encountered. Kiana. His voice cracked like a teenager's. She sat behind a mahogany desk that probably cost more than he used to pay her a year. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, diamond earrings that caught the light when she tilted her head. But it was her eyes that destroyed him. The same warm brown eyes that used to look at him with admiration and hope. Now, they held something else entirely. Cold, calculated satisfaction. Please sit down. We have business to discuss. Richard's legs barely carried him to the chair. His mind raced through 1,000 questions, but only one came out. How? Kiana's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. How did the maid become the millionaire? Is that what you're asking? Yes. No. He couldn't form complete sentences. 15 years, Richard. 15 years to plan this moment. She opened a file folder and spread photographs across the desk. Pictures of him at charity events, business meetings, even leaving his apartment last Tuesday. Someone had been watching him for years. After you fired me, I went home to Georgia. Remember Georgia, Richard? That backward place you said I should have never left. His throat felt like sandpaper. Kiana, what I did was wrong, but nothing. Her voice cut through his excuse like ice water. You want to know how I built this empire? I'll tell you. She leaned forward, and for a moment, he caught her scent. Still the same vanilla perfume that used to drive him crazy during their secret meetings. I took your money, the severance check you threw at me, to keep quiet, and I invested every penny. Tech stocks, real estate, small businesses that needed capital. Richard's breathing became shallow. The silence agreement dash. Oh, I honor that agreement. I never said a word about what happened between us. But I never said I wouldn't destroy you through legal business practices. She stood up and walked to the window overlooking downtown Atlanta. Even from behind, she commanded the room in ways that made his body respond despite the terror flooding his system. I studied your company, Richard. Every merger, every partnership, every weakness. I bought shares through shell companies. I cultivated relationships with your competitors. I learned everything about the man who thought he could use me and throw me away. What? The word came out as a whisper. She turned back to face him, and for just a second, he saw a flash of the girl she used to be. Vulnerable, hurt, human, because you took everything from me. My job, my dignity, my trust in people. You made me feel like I was worth nothing. That's not true, Dash. Then you threw money at me like I was some kind of prostitute and made me sign papers promising to disappear from your life forever. Richard's chest tightened. He remembered that day differently. But looking at her now, he wondered if his memory had been protecting him from the truth. What do you want? He asked. Kiana's smile returned, but this time it held something else. Something that made his pulse race for entirely different reasons. I want you to meet someone very important to me. She pressed a button on her phone. Maya, would you come in here, please? The door opened, and Richard's world exploded into a million pieces. What about to happen next will change everything. Make sure you're subscribed because Maya's entrance is going to blow your mind. The girl who walked through that door had Richard's green eyes and his stubborn jawline. She also had 15 years of questions burning in her chest. Maya, Kiana said softly, I'd like you to meet Richard Langston. Have you ever watched someone's heartbreak in real time? That's what happened when Maya studied the man sitting across from her mother's desk. She dreamed about this moment her entire life, but never like this. You're him, Maya said, her voice steady despite the storm in her eyes. You're my father." Richard couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except stare at this beautiful young woman who looked exactly like his sister had at that age. "Maya." He started to stand, but she held up her hand. "Don't. Just don't." The girl was 15, but she carried herself like royalty. Like her mother. Like someone who had never needed anyone's permission to take up space in a room. "Sit down, Richard," Kiana commanded. "Maya has some things she wants to say to you." Maya walked closer, studying his face like she was memorizing every detail. "Do you know what it's like growing up without a father?" "Maya, I didn't know Dash." She tried to tell you. Maya's voice grew stronger with each word. "Mom told me about that night. How she came to you scared and pregnant, and you threw her out like trash." Richard's hand shook. "I was young. I was stupid. I made terrible choices, Dash." "You made choices that affected my life," Maya interrupted. "Every birthday without a dad. Every school play where other kids had fathers in the audience. Every time someone asked me where I got my green eyes because they sure didn't come from Mom." Kiana watched silently as her daughter confronted the man who had shaped both their lives through his absence. Maya pulled out her phone and showed Richard a photo. A teenage boy with dark hair and kind eyes. "This is Marcus, my boyfriend. Want to know what he said when I told him my father abandoned us?" Richard swallowed hard. He said any man stupid enough to walk away from Mom and me didn't deserve to call himself a father. The words hit Richard like physical blows. This girl, his daughter, had more strength and wisdom at 15 than he'd had at 30. "Maya," he whispered, "I know I can't undo what I did, but if you let me Dash." "Let you what? Be my dad now." Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I already have everything I need. A mother who built an empire from nothing. A family who chose to love me. Friends who got my back." She leaned closer, and Richard caught a glimpse of Kiana's fire in her young eyes. "But there is one thing you can do for me. Anything. You can sign Mom's contract and disappear from our lives forever. Because we don't need your money, and we sure don't need your guilt." Maya turned toward the door, then looked back over her shoulder. "Oh, and Richard, happy Father's Day. It's next month, in case you forgot." The door closed behind her, leaving Richard alone with the woman who had just orchestrated the most devastating 15 minutes of his life. What happens when Maya leaves? Drop your predictions in the comments below. The silence after Maya left felt heavy enough to crush buildings. Richard sat in that chair like a man who had just watched his own execution. His daughter, the daughter he never knew existed, had looked him in the eye and told him to disappear forever. "She's incredible," he whispered. "Have you ever been proud of something you had no right to claim?" That's exactly what Richard felt watching Maya walk away. This brilliant, strong young woman shared his DNA, but Kiana had built her into someone extraordinary. Yes, she is. Kiana's voice was softer now, almost gentle. She got into Harvard early admission, full scholarship. She wants to study international law. Harvard. Richard's head snapped up. She's 15, 16 next month. She skipped 2 grades. Kiana's maternal pride was impossible to hide. She also speaks 4 languages, plays violin, and runs track. Richard stared at the door Maya had walked through. "I missed everything." "Yes, you did." The truth sat between them like a third person in the room. 16 years of birthday parties, school plays, skin knees, first days of school, and proud moments that belonged to someone else. "Why didn't you try harder to tell me?" The question came out before Richard could stop it. Kiana's eyes flashed dangerously. "Try harder? I stood in your office, terrified and pregnant, and you accused me of trying to trap you. You handed me a check and told me to take care of it. What part of that conversation suggested you wanted to be a father?" The memory came flooding back. Kiana's tears, her trembling hands, the way she'd looked at him like he was her whole world right before he destroyed it. "I was scared," he admitted. "I was 28 years old running a company I wasn't ready for. My father just died. The board was questioning every decision I made. And then you. Then I what? Complicated your perfect life." Richard ran his hands through his hair. "You weren't a complication. You were. God, Kiana, you're the only real thing in my world. The only person who looked at me and didn't see dollar signs or connections or what I could do for them." Kiana's expression softened for just a moment. Then why did you throw that away? Because I was an idiot. Because I listened to my lawyers who said pregnant employees were liability issues. Because I was terrified that if I let myself love you, really love you, I'd lose focus and destroy everything my father built. The words hung in the air between them. Love. He'd said it. Kiana stood up and walked her window again. Outside, Atlanta buzzed with life, but inside this office, time felt suspended. It's too late for apologies, Richard. I know, but it's not too late for you to do the right thing. She turned back to face him, and for the first time since he'd walked in her office, she looked like the woman he used to hold in his arms. Is redemption possible after 15 years? Tell us what you think Richard should do next. Kiana placed a single document on the desk between them, like she was dealing the final card in a poker game that had lasted 15 years. You have two choices, Richard. Have you ever been offered salvation and damnation in the same breath? That's exactly what Richard faced as he stared at the contract that could change everything. Choice 1, Kiana continued, her voice steady as steel. Sign this agreement. I buy your company for enough money to pay your debts and keep you out of prison. You take the money, leave New York, and never contact Maya or me again. Richard's hands trembled as he picked up the document. The numbers were generous, more generous than he deserved. Enough to start over somewhere else, maybe even rebuild. What's choice 2? Kiana's smile was dangerous. You refuse my offer. Face the SEC investigation alone. Go to prison for fraud. Lose everything anyway, but this time with no safety net. That's not really a choice, isn't it? Kiana leaned back in her chair, studying him like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. You could fight the charges, hire better lawyers, risk everything on the chance that you might prove your innocence. Richard laughed bitterly. We both know I'm not innocent. No, you're not. But then again, neither am I. The admission hung between them like a confession. Kiana had orchestrated his downfall with surgical precision, and they both knew it. You want to know something funny? Richard set the contract down without signing it. I used to dream about you. Richard Dash. No, let me finish. After I fired you, after you disappeared, I would lie awake at night wondering what happened to you. Whether you were okay. Whether I what? Whether you kept the baby. Kiana's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the pain underneath. You made it very clear what you thought I should do about that. I was wrong. About everything. Richard stood up and walked toward her window. I've spent 15 years building an empire, and for what? I have no family, no real friends, nobody who would miss me if I disappeared tomorrow. Is this supposed to make me feel sorry for you? Richard turned back to face her. Maya is the most incredible person I've ever met, and I had nothing to do with that. You did that. You raised a daughter who's smarter and stronger than I'll ever be. Kiana's eyes glistened, but she didn't let the tears fall. She's pretty amazing. She hates me. Can you blame her? No. Richard moved closer to Kiana's desk. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. What? Do you really want me to disappear forever? Or is there some part of you, some small part, that remembers what we used to have? The question hit Kiana like a physical blow. She stood up quickly, putting distance between them. What we had was 15 years ago, Richard. We're different people now. Are we? Because right now, looking at you, I feel exactly the same way I did that first night you stayed late to help me with the Morrison contract. What's Kiana going to say? Drop your predictions below because her answer will shock you. Before Kiana could answer Richard's question, her office door burst open. Maya rushed in, her face pale with panic. Mom, we have a problem. Have you ever had your past and present collide in the worst possible way? That's exactly what happened when Maya held up her phone showing a news article that made Kiana's blood run cold. Richard Langston linked to mysterious Atlanta businesswoman, Maya read aloud. Sources close to the investigation suggest Brooks Enterprises CEO Kiana Brooks may have personal motives for her recent acquisition attempts. Richard grabbed the phone, scanning the article. How did they find out about the connection? That's not the worst part, Maya continued. Look at the comments. The comments section was filled with speculation about Kiana and Richard's relationship. Some users had already started digging into public records, looking for connections between them. If they figure out I'm his daughter. Maya's voice trailed off. Kiana's protective instincts kicked in immediately. We'll handle this. Richard, you need to leave. Now. Wait. Richard grabbed her arm gently. If I leave now, it looks like we're hiding something. The press will assume the worst. Let them assume, Kiana said, but her voice lacked conviction. Maya looked between her parents, seeing something neither of them wanted to admit. You still have feelings for each other. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Maya, that's not Dash, Kiana started. Mom, I'm 16, not 6. I can see the way you look at him, and the way he looks at you. Maya crossed her arms. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Richard stared at this incredible young woman who seemed to understand the situation better than either adult in the room. What do you mean? Maya's phone buzzed with another news alert. This one made her face go white. Mom, someone leaked information about the SEC investigation. They're saying you might have inside knowledge about Richard's business practices. Kiana's empire, everything she'd built over 15 years, was suddenly at risk. If investigators started looking into her connection to Richard, they might uncover the revenge plot she'd spent decades planning. This is my fault, Richard said quietly. I brought this mess into your life. No, Kiana said firmly. I brought this on myself when I decided to destroy you. Maya looked at her mother with new understanding. That's what this was about? Revenge. The truth was finally out. Kiana had built her success partly to prove she was better than the man who'd thrown her away, and partly to get close enough to hurt him the way he'd hurt her. Maya, I can explain Dash. Actually, I think it's kind of awesome, Maya interrupted. You spent 15 years playing the long game. That's next-level strategy right there. Both adults stared at her in shock. But now what? Maya continued. The press is sniffing around. The government might start investigating Mom's business. And you two are standing here pretending you don't want to rip each other's clothes off. Maya, Kiana's face turned red. What? I have eyes, Mom. And honestly, maybe it's time you both stopped punishing yourself for mistakes you made when you were young and stupid. Could a teenager really be the wisest person in the room? Let us know what you think in the comments. 3 hours later, Kiana's world was burning on every news channel in America. Federal investigators are now looking into Brooks Enterprises following allegations of insider trading and corporate espionage. The reporter announced while Richard watched from Kiana's office couch. Have you ever watched someone you care about lose everything they've worked for? That's exactly what Richard experienced as Kiana paced her office like a caged tiger, fielding calls from lawyers and trying to protect the empire she'd built from nothing. Yes, I understand the implications, Kiana said into her phone. No, I won't be making any public statements today. She hung up and turned to Richard. My board is calling an emergency meeting. 3 major clients have already pulled their contracts. How bad is it? Bad enough that I might lose everything. Kiana's laugh was bitter. 15 years of building this company, and it could all disappear because someone figured out we have history. Maya looked up from her laptop where she'd been monitoring social media. It's getting worse. Someone found pictures of you two together from that corporate party last month. Richard moved closer to look at the screen. The photos showed him and Kiana talking, but from the angles, it looked like they were having an intimate conversation. We need to get ahead of this, Richard said. Let me call a press conference. I'll take full responsibility, Dash. Absolutely not. Kiana's voice was sharp. You'll make it worse. How could it possibly be worse? Before Kiana could answer, her assistant knocked on the door. MS. Brooks, there are reporters in the lobby asking for statements about your relationship with Mr. Langston. The room fell silent. They were trapped. Maya closed her laptop and stood up. I have an idea, but you're both going to hate it. What kind of idea? Kiana asked. We tell the truth. Richard and Kiana stared at her like she'd suggested they all jump off the building. Maya, we can't, Dash. Why not? Maya interrupted. Look, the press is going to keep digging until they find out everything anyway. We know I'm Richard's daughter. We know you two have history. We know this whole business deal was about more than just money. She walked to the window, overlooking the city that had become her mother's kingdom. But what they don't know is the real story. The story about a young woman who was hurt by someone she trusted. The story about a man who made terrible mistakes and spent 15 years regretting them. The story about a daughter who grew up strong because her mother refused to let anyone break her. Kiana's eyes filled with tears. Maya, if we tell that story, everyone will know that I'm the daughter of two people who loved each other once and made mistakes. That my mom is the strongest person on the planet. That my father is finally ready to do the right thing. Maya turned back to face them both. Mom, you taught me that running from problems doesn't solve them. And Richard, if you really want to be my father, then prove it. Stand up and fight for us instead of running away like you did 15 years ago. The challenge hung in the air between them. Will they take Maya's advice? Comment below with your thoughts on this family's impossible situation. The press conference room was packed with reporters hungry for scandal, but what they got instead was something much more powerful: the truth. Richard stood at the podium with Kiana beside him and Maya just offstage, ready to face the consequences of their complicated history. Have you ever watched someone choose courage over comfort? That's exactly what happened when Richard cleared his throat and began the most important speech of his life. 15 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life, Richard began, his voice steady despite the cameras flashing. I was a young CEO who thought success meant keeping my personal and professional lives completely separate. When an employee, someone I cared about deeply, came to me with news that would change both our lives, I panicked. The room was dead silent. This wasn't the corporate damage control they'd expected. I fired Kiana Brooks because she was pregnant with my child. I gave her money and made her sign papers promising to stay out of my life. I told myself I was protecting my company, but the truth is I was protecting myself from having to grow up and take responsibility. Murmurs rippled through the crowd of reporters. Kiana stepped closer to the microphone. I took that money and went home to Georgia, where I raised our daughter alone. But I didn't waste the opportunity Richard's severance gave me. I invested every penny, built a business empire, and yes, I planned to buy his company when it was vulnerable. Was this revenge? A reporter called out. Kiana and Richard looked at each other, 15 years of pain and regret passing between them in a single glance. It started as revenge, Kiana admitted. But sometimes when you spend that much time studying someone, watching their life from a distance, you start to see the whole person instead of just the person who hurt you. Richard took over. Kiana Brooks built something incredible while I was coasting on my father's legacy. She raised a daughter who's smarter and stronger than both of us combined. She turned pain into power, and I have nothing but respect for what she's accomplished. What about your daughter? Another reporter asked. How does she feel about all this? Richard smiled for the first time since the press conference began. Why don't you ask her yourself? Maya walked onto the stage with the confidence of someone who'd inherited the best qualities from both parents. At 16, she commanded the room like she was born for this moment. My name is Maya Brooks Langston, she said, claiming both their names like it was her right. And I think it's time adults stop being afraid of the truth. The reporters leaned forward. This teenager was about to give them the story of the year. What's Maya going to say next? This is the moment everything changes. Maya looked out at the crowd of reporters and smiled like she owned the world. You want to know what it's like being raised by a single mother who builds empires in her spare time? Maya began. It's incredible. My mom taught me that when life knocks you down, you don't just get back up, you come back stronger. Have you ever seen someone turn their greatest vulnerability into their greatest strength? That's exactly what Maya did as she owned her story in front of the whole world. I grew up without knowing my father, and yes, that hurt. But also taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who show up for you every single day. She looked back at Kiana, whose eyes were bright with proud tears. My mother showed up. Every school play, every science fair, every moment that mattered. She built a company that employs hundreds of people and gives back to communities that need it most. That's the woman you should be writing about. The reporters were scribbling frantically, but Maya wasn't finished. As for my father, he made mistakes. Big ones. But standing up here today, taking responsibility for those mistakes instead of hiding behind lawyers and PR teams, that takes courage. And I think courage is worth something. Richard's throat tightened with emotion. His daughter, this amazing young woman, was defending him after everything he'd done wrong. So here's what's going to happen. Maya continued with the authority of someone twice her age. My parents are going to figure out how to work together like the adults they are. Brooks Enterprises is going to continue changing the world. And I'm going to Harvard next year to study law, so I can carry on the family tradition of fighting for what's right. A reporter raised her hand. What about romance? Are your parents getting back together? Maya grinned. That's between them. But I will say this, I've seen how they look at each other when they think nobody's watching. And after 15 years apart, they still finish each other's sentences. She glanced back at Richard and Kiana, who were indeed standing closer than they had been when the press conference started. Love doesn't always follow the timeline we want it to. Sometimes it takes years to grow up enough to deserve the person you hurt. Sometimes it takes building an empire to prove you're strong enough to forgive. And sometimes it takes a 16-year-old to tell two brilliant adults to stop being stupid. The room erupted in laughter. Maya stepped back from the microphone and looked at her parents. Your turn, she said quietly. Richard and Kiana stepped forward together, and for the first time in 15 years, they felt like a team. We don't know what the future holds, Kiana said into the microphone, but we know we're going to face it together as a family. Richard nodded. All three of us. 6 months later, Maya started her freshman year at Harvard. Kiana and Richard were planning their wedding. A small ceremony in Georgia where their love story began and ended and began again. And sometimes, late at night, they would laugh about how their daughter saved them both. The end. Thanks for watching this incredible journey with us. What did you think of Maya's wisdom? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if this story moved you. And don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories that prove love can conquer anything, even 15 years of regret. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. We love hearing from our global family.